Football made simple. Become great at your craft by finding ways to make it simple for those around you. This is the Coaching 101 podcast hosted by Find a Way Productions with your co-host Daniel Chamberlain and Kenny Simpson. What's up, coaches? This is the Coaching 101 podcast. I'm Daniel Chamberlain here with Coach Simpson. And tonight we are joined by football culture consultant, which is a way cool title, by the way. JP Nerbun. How are you, sir?
Good. Thanks for having me, fellas.
Yeah, absolutely, man. We love having guests, and I think you're the first one for the second season.
Yeah.
We started a season right in the middle of football season, and so having anybody else on was just too chaotic. So we're super. I don't want to say we're too glad about having the season over. We both made a pretty good little playoff run in our respective schools, but it did come to an end. So, but now we get to get back having some guests and having a little fun on the podcast. So thank you so much for joining us. Why don't you go ahead and give us a little introduction about yourself, man? Where are you at, and how'd you get there?
Yeah, I'm a former high school basketball coach, coached a little professional basketball as well in Europe, and did that for 15 years. And now I am a trained leadership coach. Got my executive leadership coaching certification through Georgetown University. But the last 6 years, I've been coaching coaches, essentially, really just focusing on sports. A lot of basketball coaches, but I also work with football, field hockey, ice hockey, volleyball, soccer, track and field. Work with coaches from high school level to Division I and some pro coaches. So what that means is there's kind of like a coach and a consultant role that I serve. As a coach, I'm really just trying to help coaches to show up and be their best selves for their teams. And so that's, we're working on supporting coaches in their mental health, supporting coaches in their learning and their growth as a leader. And we're doing that, as well as, doing some consulting and helping them to address the culture of their team. Every culture is a system, and there's different processes and procedures and ways that we operate, the things that we do that create the culture that we have in our team. And so I work with coaches to fix, repair, make some changes in that system so they can create a culture that gives players a great experience, helps them grow, and leaves their team performing the best when it comes to game time. So that's my role.
Well, that's awesome, and I know that's a need that every coach truly has. I haven't seen a coach that has the perfect leadership style or culture yet. And even on the military side, like we're, some may even say a tainted culture just because it's so bizarre when people get in charge of other people, the crazy things that can happen. But yeah, man, it's really awesome. And I know leadership is something that's always just really impressed me is people who have it together and people are really trying to work on it. So, man, I think any coach would cherish someone like you coming around and helping them figure out how to do things the right way. So kudos to you for really filling a need there.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. It's, when I first got started almost 7 years ago, I had someone that I hired as a coach for me. And the beauty, like, there's great to have mentors, and we all need mentors, that people that have walked the journey before us. And hopefully we can all find that. The role of a coach is a little bit different. The majority of a lot of my work when I'm coaching a coach, it's a lot of asking questions, not necessarily sharing advice. Like, you guys probably have more coaching experience than I do, or just as much. You coach football. I never coached football. There's a lot of different unique challenges. And so a lot of mine is asking questions, helping the coach I'm working with to take different perspectives, helping them to reflect. And when I got started almost 7 years ago, I kind of like I had hired this coach myself. That was pretty profound change, helped me make that shift. And so I wanted to go off and share that and help other coaches. I initially started just working with coaches' teams, but I really and I do, like, right now I'm traveling and I'm working with some teams, but they're with coaches that I coach, because I really believe that before I can be effective showing up and running some workshop for a team, I need to be working with the coach to help them show up as their best self. And only then does like really anything I do when I come in, work or stick, it serves effective. So yeah, this is really at the core of what I do. And I'm highly passionate about it for the reason you said is like, we just, as coaches, the journey can be very lonely and we need someone on that journey with us.
Absolutely. Well, I think we might as well jump right in. We won't talk playoffs ball tonight. We won't talk too much about our seasons, I don't suppose. Coach Simpson, before we get started, man, can you tell us how to simplify football for our staff and for our players?
Coaching 101 podcast is sponsored by Findaway Productions. Findaway Productions also sponsors fbcoachsimpson.com for all your coaching needs with over 30 coaching materials, books, as well as 50 PowerPoints and videos and smaller materials and the free magazine headsets. Findaway Productions also sponsors offensivecoordinatoracademy.com, all things offense, and defensivecoordinatoracademy.com, all things defense.
This episode is brought to you by Athletic Speed and Movement. At athleticspeedmovement.com, we've taken Dell Basket's 45 years of speed and movement training and put it all in one place just for you. You can get the same training that NFL players have been getting for years, collegiate players have been getting for years, and now high schools across the nation are paying thousands of dollars to bring Dell in to install his system, but we've got it online for you. It's time to help your team become faster, not just in the 40, not just their sprint speed, but between the tackles and their cuts while they're chasing down the quarterback. It's time for you to help them become faster everywhere. Jump over to athleticspeedmovement.com. There's an orange button there. Just click it. It says, get the keys to playing faster. You'll get the 3 core movement video from Dell. He's explaining the science behind it, all for just the price of your email. Check it out, athleticspeedmovement.com. Awesome, Coach. Thank you so much for that. All right, well, Coach Nerbun, the first thing I wanted to ask, and Coach Simpson, I know you'll be able to answer some of these too, and that's just, you talk about helping coaches and leadership and with culture and all that. So my question is, if I was throwing a very broad net and I was going to catch the top 3, 4, 5 things that coaches needed to be helped with, all the places you've been to do that, kind of what are those things that most coaches are lacking that could help us build that stronger culture, that leadership presence?
Yeah. So I'll give you a kind of brief overview of 4 things that I think are really important to the framework that I talk about in my book, The Culture System, and just some of the resources that I often provide for coaches. The first is just really when it comes to something around our leadership, and that's at the core of it. How we show up. It's really great to have like a leadership philosophy, which mission statement, visions, values, those types of things. I think coaches have their mantras, the things they put up on walls, and those are great. But what we really need is disciplines in our life, habits, things that are going to keep us grounded and moving towards that. It's one thing to have these values of trust, care, commitment, compete, mantras in the wall. But if we don't actually live those out, if we're not growing into those values ourselves, then we will fall short as a leader and trying to create that great culture. The other 3 things, and I'll let you kind of pick where we want to go from there, but I really, really important is how we establish the culture. And I think about culture is we measure culture by relationships and standards. Standards, how we do things, and relationships are how connected are people here. So if you want a strong culture, you got to establish those relationships early on, build connections, and you also have to establish standards. And I obviously a big fan of co-creating those standards with our athletes, not just me standing up high and dictating. And then so the next thing I think is really important that coaches don't do is we set those standards, but we don't necessarily always have a great place of supporting those. We might support them with speeches and rah talk and things like that, but we really need to be able to, when an athlete's struggling to meet the standard of our program, we need to find ways to come in there and offer support in a way that's going to connect with them. It's going to help them to self-assess, help them to self-correct, and empower them, right? Is it really, really important? So we do that in a way that helps them, and we're emotionally regulated. Really, really important. And the last one is just how we enforce standards in our culture. This is probably where I see coaches struggle most, is we want to hold guys accountable. We need accountability. And we either get really permissive as coaches because we don't want to have hard conversations, we don't like the fallout from discipline, or we go too transactional, we go too fear-based. And then all of a sudden players are just doing what we tell them to do because they're afraid of consequences. We want players that work hard, have a good attitude, because that's who they want to be. And that's because it'll help them to lead the success that we want.
Yeah, those are all amazing, and not all of those great points, but I think some people do overlook those a little bit. Coach Simpson, I know you're going to have something to say here as well. He kind of took, unfortunately, the cream right off the top, right? Like that's perfect. So what is your culture, and how do you establish it, and then how do you keep it? Because it's going to be a great episode. I'm pretty excited about this one. Go ahead, Coach Simpson. Sorry about that.
Yeah, that's fine. I was going to, you mentioned you hit the nail on the head. I mean, that's why he's the consultant, the professional, and I'm just the coach. But what I put in there was do what I do, not what I say. Coach kind of he alluded to that, said it way more eloquently than that. But like, I have a problem when a guy weighs 400 pounds and he's your strength and conditioning coach. Or I have a problem when you're telling your kids we want to be disciplined and you can't show up to a coaching clinic because you drank too much the night before. Or I have a problem when you say, hey, we're going to be committed and you've been through 5 divorces. Like, I got a problem with that. And I think sometimes as coaches, we don't always see what our issues are. And I'm not saying all those guys are wrong. If you're one of those guys that I just hit right on the head with, I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm saying that you need to self-assess, just like I have to self-assess all the stuff that I screwed up in. And then maybe I'm not the guy to get in front of the team and preach that value. Maybe it's another coach who's really good in that value. That was my second point, was in the football world, we're able to hire a lot of coaches. So I think when I can figure out my weakness, which I'm betting you guys can probably guess, is I'm not the most compassionate guy, then I'm going to go hire guys that are good in that world that can either help me get better and see another point of view, or maybe bring a consultant in like Coach here, or I'm going to allow them to take some reign in those areas where I struggle. Recognizing your weakness doesn't just mean correcting yourself, but sometimes it means allowing people that are better than you to have leeway in that world. In the football coaching world, or maybe basketball, whatever, if you've got multiple assistants, they probably have different strengths than you if you've done a good job kind of assessing yourself and what you need, instead of just hiring a position coach because he's a good online guy. You're going to hire a guy who maybe connects with kids in a level you've never seen. And then you're going to hire a guy who's really disciplined. And those two guys are going to kind of help you in those areas. I think that's sometimes missed. And then the third thing I'd say for coaches is you got to build a support system. And whether that's bringing in, JP here to come visit with you and have a consultant, I think there's definitely a tremendous value in that. Like, I think that's worth whatever price he charged. I don't know. It's worth it, or if you, like, you had to have a mentor or have a supportive family, but you've got to build a support system, because there's going to come a time when you're going to need to lean on that a lot. And I don't recommend it being people that are on your staff currently. Like, I don't recommend it being an assistant coach or a current coach. I think it needs to be somebody who's outside the situation, who can see things objectively, or if things come to worse and you get fired, that relationship is still there. Like, you have a support system that stays in place. And like you mentioned, Daniel, Coach already mentioned these things way more eloquently than I think. I just basically highlighted what he said to start, but those are the things I thought of when you said that.
Yeah, the building your support system and filling your needs, knowing yourself, right? Knowing what you can't do, and going out and find somebody to do that. I've got 2 mentors, and probably am adding more all the time in this crazy football coaching world, and Joe Daniels one of them. And the thing he taught me right off the bat on the business side as well is, if you don't know how to do something, hire a professional. Right? Quit faking it till you make it on stuff that matters. And that's exactly where I think, Coach Nerbun here, he comes in, because we don't know. I mean, you can just highlight it right here on this podcast, the way that he can speak about these things, and he has so much more knowledge of it than us 2 football coaches. And that's okay, right? You can't be a master of everything. And so I'm glad you have that type of service out there, Coach, because there's a lot of us that do need it. Kind of talking on what coaches I see that they hurt or are lacking the most. It's probably the discipline more than anything, and I mean that in a, how do I uphold the standard, right? When a kid breaks the standard, now what? Because we still have to win football games to keep our career or to keep our job, and sometimes it can be your career. It ends somewhere, right? And maybe it's at getting that fired that last time. And so the ability to build a culture in which you can set a starter because he did something wrong, and you don't lose your job because the school board's going to fire you for it, or a parent's going to be crazy about it, whatever. And then the second one is parents. I think we struggle a lot with parents, and it's because I've been in a lot of small schools. I'm at a huge school right now, and it's a culture shock for me. But at small schools, it seems like parents kind of rule the roost, honestly. And if they don't right now, they're trying to get on a school board, or they're trying to, without going through all the schooling you had to do to get your job, they're trying to go out there and get a position of authority to be able to rule the roost. So, parents' relationships are something a lot of coaches do struggle with. I've heard a lot of little things along the way to help those, but it's still, I dealt with it last year, right? I had a parent that was mad at me, and this year it's complete opposite. This year I have 6, 7, 8 parents thanking me for the time I'm investing in their children, and understanding their kids aren't perfect, and we're trying every day, and hey, you coach them hard and you love them up, and we love that. And so parents can be finicky as well. Case in point, we were in a ball game the other night, and the Bixby Spartans had won like 71 out of their last 72 games. So they're really good. That coaching staff has really got things clicking. And it sucks for us because we took 2 losses from this year on the varsity side, and our freshman team did too. I think we took 4 losses over there. So they're really, really good at what they do. And they were in a semifinal game against us, and the parents are screaming from the stands to their staff how to coach football, like what plays they need to be running and who needs to be on the field. And I'm just like, even when you win all the time, parents don't go away. So I'm really interested, Coach Nerbun, to kind of see how, talk about your book in a little while, and just kind of see what your thoughts are on parents as well. So awesome. So I think really I would like to talk about the discipline. We'd kind of picked a couple topics there ahead of time, and hopefully we hit them just like we wanted to. But the discipline to keep it, building that, establishing your culture, and then maintaining it. So, Coach Nerbun, I'd love to hear what you have to say on that.
Yeah, well, I think Coach Simpson really made a great point earlier. It's just like, you can't really hold guys to a standard if you don't meet the standard yourself. I remember staff that I had observed, and they were having a hard time with the players, with the locker room, and keeping that tidy, and the weight room. And look at go in their coach's office, and there's trash all over the place, and Burger King and McDonald's wrappers all over. And I'm like, well, guys, you got to be the example, right? So it's really, really important when it comes to discipline that we're setting the example. We don't have to be perfect. Back to Coach Simpson's point, well, hey, he's not very compassionate, but you want to have a growth mindset towards yourself as well as your players. And so if a guy on your player is not very compassionate towards his teammates, probably you're challenging him to grow in compassion towards others. And because that he can grow that. So we can grow it too. And so I think one of the most profound things that we can do as coaches is not necessarily be perfect, but model our values. And where we know we are short in that, we communicate, hey, guys, this is something I'm working at this year. Like for me, it was like temper. Like I was like, I wanted guys that played with self-control and didn't talk back to the referees and didn't have big emotional explosions on the sideline or on the court. But yet I was highly explosive on the sideline, and I was arguing with referees. So, I wasn't going to conquer that overnight, but I just vulnerable with my team. Like, hey, I'm working at this year. I need your support. I need your help. So our own example is a really big thing that really gives us if we don't do that, then we don't really have the right to hold guys accountable. Once we've got that right to hold guys accountable, then it's like, have we made the standard clear? Is the standard clear? So that comes down to establishing the standard early on. And you can do that through team meetings. I've had coaches just say, hey, you guys, here's 4 areas of our program: the weight room, locker room, practices, and games. You guys come up with, what you want the standards to be for that. And then coaches should have some non-negotiables. For me, it's listen, be on time, don't complain. Other coaches have trust. They want to be, everyone to be honest, or other little very specific things. You can't have non-negotiables for every area of the program, but you got to make sure you communicate those early. And then you got to also, but you don't just communicate the standard. You got to communicate what the consequences are going to be. When you don't meet the standard, we're going to do this, right? For a lot of times though, we're going to rely too much on the stick, the conditioning, the yelling at players, the push-ups and the running. And I'm a little bit idealistic, coaches, in this, and I'll let you guys challenge me on this if you want, but like, I don't want to be using conditioning as a consequence when I actually want them to believe that conditioning is good for them. Like, we have to get more creative. I want to teach these kids, like, we want to be conditioning, we want to be running, right? So often we like do all these things, like we run kids and we just give all these negative connotations with something that's supposed to be good for them. So we talk about losing the privileges, which means they lose practice time, they lose the opportunity to compete in a drill, to get better in a drill. They have to, or do-overs, off the court stuff. We do a lot of restorative consequences and stuff. So I'll shut up here for a second, but yeah, I'll let you decide if we want to go deeper into what that looks like in a practice setting. I'm happy to give examples.
Next, Daniel, or what do you want to do?
Yeah. Well, I was just gonna say you'll catch no flack from me for wanting to get conditioning out of discipline. My wife is a physical therapist, and I'm a guy who, we paid. I can remember running gassers for however many points we allowed on a game we won in high school. Right? Like, what are we really doing out here? So yeah, I 100% agree. Like, there's certain things that we don't know how to discipline, right? Coaches just absolutely don't know how. All we know is just go run. You're gonna put your helmet on, strap it up, you're gonna run, or you're gonna do up downs, or whatever it is. So, I got to be careful because the military side of me, I could just be like, hey, let's just go play, right? Like, if you wanna kind of not show discipline, we'll go find some discipline. Unfortunately, so I have to be extra careful so that I don't let my other career kind of jump into this one as well.
I was going to say, I think you got to be careful to equate, and Coach did a good job of it. Discipline and punishment are not the same thing. A lot of times we just think of punishment, which is part of discipline. A lot of times he called it the stick. So there's a time when speak soft and carry a big stick matters. Like, they got to know that you're not playing, and whatever that needs to look like, it needs to look like. And I'm not a big fan of conditioning either. I'm a bigger fan of finding a much more persuasive punishment. And generally, the biggest detriment to any kid is called the bench. And so when you're able to do that, that's the best way you're going to do it. But a couple other tips I would say, and Coach hit them. One, relationships matter. Like, I can discipline you all I want. If there's not a relationship there, Coach hit it right at the beginning. I loved how he said it is a transactional. You play well, I'm happy. You stink, I'm mad. You follow the rules, I'm happy. You don't follow the rules, you're worthless. That's transactional. And a lot of us kind of live in that world because we're not really trying to change the lives of kids. We're just trying to get through the day without them screwing it up. And unfortunately, you do that as a parent too. I'm a parent, so I know a lot of times when I'm really tired and I'm at my worst, I just want to go to bed. Would you just shut up? And so it's the same thing with coaching. I just want to get through this. Would you just do what you're supposed to do? The second point I had on here was they got to know why you're asking them to do what you're asking. So Coach brought up, let them be part of that process. Why is it important that this happens? Why is it important that we do this? It's not a guarantee they're going to do it, but it's much more likely they are going to at least attempt to do it if they understand that this is done for this specific reason. And the last thing I've got on this one, Coach, was I think you can empower them, and Coach brought it up. kind of empowering your players. One of the statements my old superintendent used to do to me, and it was a trick for a while until I learned to see through it, but it took me a couple of years, is he would always start off a conversation with, "Hey, coach, I need you to help me with," and then the blank part of that was something I'd screwed up on that he wanted me to fix. But when he said, "Can you help me with," and then he filled it in there, I thought, sure, I like the superintendent. I want him to be happy. I wanted to get that fixed instead of calling me in and saying, "You're an idiot. You just did this. You need to fix it." And so the way you phrase it, and then you'll also be, I've been amazed at work this year. I did it this year on purpose. I would pull kids aside that had an issue, a weakness. We all have weaknesses. And then I would ask them to go help a different kid with the same weakness. Like, "Hey, could you go make sure that Johnny is here on time and he's ready to roll when we're going out for practice?" Well, to a kid who I know wasn't really good at doing that. And it was amazing how it worked. Doesn't always work, but it kind of worked. Like now he's on time and the other guy who was late, they're both on time. It doesn't always work that way, but coach brought the word to empower your athletes. So, coach, I want to go back to you. I know you got more on this, I'm sure.
Yeah, well, I think you made up a good point too. I think there's a thing about punishment, and I really want to avoid punishment as much as I can. I use the word punishment as like I'm doing something to you, I'm punishing you. So we really try to talk about consequences with our athlete, that we don't have punishment, we have consequences. The consequences you've done to yourself. And so much of our language is really important in discipline too. So when the guy is not working hard in a drill, hey man, I want to first support and then I hold accountability. You don't want just to buy much accountability. So I might say to the player like, "Hey, I know you can give more, and you need to give more. Yes, we're going to have to ask you to step off. Guy doesn't work, still doesn't work hard. Say, hey, step off. We'll see you in the next drill, right? You lost the opportunity to get better, And what I'm doing there is I'm really emphasizing their choice. Hey, you got a choice here, man. I might pull a guy aside. Hey, you got a choice. Your attitude is not where it needs to be. It's not above the line for us. So if you can't get that corrected, you're gonna have to step off. You lose the opportunity there. But it's all about choice. And so what happens really powerful is we look at the three drivers of intrinsic motivation: autonomy, mastery, and purpose. Well, autonomy is so important that they feel that they have control over their life, they're over their scenario. And so we don't ever want them to feel like it's like they've lost control. They always have a choice. They can choose to work hard, or they can choose not to. They can choose to have a good attitude. They can choose not to. They choose to not have a good attitude. They're going to choose to step. Then they're choosing to step off, or they choose to not be prepared. They're choosing to not practice. Right. And I think that one of the great challenges too is like if when we use the bench, and I really agree with you, coach. Like the bench has got to be an accountability tool, but we got to have other what I call progressive consequences.
Yeah.
Because if it's just the bench on Friday, well, I'm on Monday. Like it's too far out. Especially young men, they need to know. They need to be quick. And so often, what I'll see coaches do is things will just escalate with an individual. They'll kick them out of practice. It's like, well, a progressive thing. So like the first thing is just have them do it again, right? Hey, just do that again. Do that rep again. Okay, you're still not meeting it. Hey, as soon as you're ready to start working hard, you can hop back in here and let us know, and we'll get you back in the drill, right? And then maybe it's sit out a whole drill, or maybe it's sit out a few minutes before you get to that. Hey, you know what? You're clearly not feeling today. We'll see you tomorrow. Hit the showers, right? But like we want these progressions so that discipline can be quicker, and when we're using it, and so that way these guys can self-correct a little bit more. I think is one of the big focuses is just the quicker response rather than that delayed action. So it really helps guys for sure.
And I was going to say on that mode, and I can speak to myself, so I can't speak to other coaches, but generally when that happens, I've permitted laziness from this kid for maybe a couple weeks because I didn't want to deal with it. And finally, boom, there goes the lid. And this kid had been lazy for 3 weeks, but man, he got hammered. And so I think that's alluding to what coach is talking about. I wish I could count how many times I've done that, and it was a low number. It's not. And so we gotta be careful.
there's another thing too, coach, on that, like, especially like football. What's harder? You not starting your starting quarterback or running back in a
Right.
big game on Friday, or you having them sit out a drill on Tuesday's practice, right? Like, I mean, nobody's going to sit their starting quarterback on Friday. Like, most people aren't, unless they've done something really, really bad, but you can, pull a guy out. And it's just, here's the thing too, like, gratitude is a really important thing. It's the source of so much joy. And we want our kids to be grateful, not and feel entitled. Yet we build entitlement because we say, well, we're still going to play you on Friday because we need you, because we need you to win. And that's the reality. We got to win to keep our jobs.
Right.
But we can build gratitude and destroy entitlements in our programs when we start to treat things more as a privilege and practice as an opportunity. And so when they lose that privilege, they're actually more grateful for it. It's when we go without that we become more grateful, right? Like think about during like COVID, all of a sudden we weren't able to go outside, or we weren't able to go over to friends. And all of a sudden we became a lot more grateful for the opportunity next time we did get to go out and be with friends, right? So anytime we go without, we appreciate more. Player goes through an injury. Oh man, their gratitude to be able to play the game comes back, So it's a small way to build gratitude and fight entitlement in programs, to discipline in this way, is to treat things as a privilege.
Coach Simpson, you'd mentioned, you kind of let things build up before you take care of it all at once, and maybe it's a few weeks. That kind of goes back to that you're either coaching it or you're allowing it, right? Like you have to create and consistency. We're talking discipline for kids right now, and in two meanings. One, discipline meaning consequences for your actions, but also discipline and staying disciplined enough to do the little things right always, right? I mean, that's something probably in every single coach's program manual, the word discipline's in there somewhere with some quote about that. Doing things even when you don't want to or whatever, right? But I mean, it's very real, and the consistency and having the discipline to coach those kids up every time they make that mistake. It does stink. Um, and it's hard when all the coaches have kind of settled into that. It's not that big of a deal. The season's coming to an end. He's not a starter anyways. But you can't do that, because then you're going to kind of isolate that one coach who's trying to take care of business. Now they're the unfun coach, right? They're the bad coach for the group, because they're just trying to maintain that standard. So excellent points, guys. I don't know how long we've been recording. I don't want to push too long. I know, JP, we don't want to go too far over an hour. And just to be cognizant of your time, you discussed earlier mental health of the coach. And I think that's one that can very quickly get away from us. I'm sure that since COVID, I imagine most coaches have been a little more aware. I think we all got that isolation part. They even down here in the South in Oklahoma, we weren't too bad, but there was still like, I can't go see my parent. You mentioned it a minute ago, talking about entitlement or great gratitude of can't go see your parents, can't go see your grandparents. So I'm hoping that everyone's got mental health on their radar a little bit more now. But I know coaches, we're the first to just be like, no, I'm fine. I don't want to talk about it. I'm fine. Right. So kind of bring us to light. Like, what have you seen coaches struggle with that? And what's some things they've seen, been able to do to kind of get over that hump and just, and take care of themselves mentally?
Yeah, it's interesting. You talk about just we get on the radar, and I think this is maybe one of the hard things about mental health, is that sometimes awareness isn't even necessarily making it any better. Like, I think people have it on their radar, but like we're more aware of it, but yet we're not actually, a lot of times we don't do anything proactive about it, and I think so we have to take steps to work on that. There's a few things that really concern me when I look at my own journey as a coach, when I've struggled with my mental health and I see in other coaches. One is our sense of self, our identity, our ego, and that our identity is so tied up in coaching that when we lose games, when our jobs are the line, when we're criticized in the media, when we're criticized on Twitter, when we're criticized by a nasty email from a parent, or we just don't feel like we're connecting with our players, that becomes really a big trigger for us. That fight or flight response just becomes super engaged in those moments. And so I think one thing is we need to have a more, is this guy, Brad Stolberg. Uh, I remember him reading in his book, Master of Change, recently. He talks about a fluid sense of self. We need to recognize that we have many identities. We're not just coaches. We're husbands, we're fathers, we're mothers, whatever. We've got other things that we do. And we coach. That's one thing. It's very easy for us as coaches because we're called coach. Everyone calls us coach. Everyone in the world knows us coach, for that identity to be solely tied up in there. And when we do that, it's very easy to fall into that transactional type of coaching where we're trying to protect that identity. I think the other thing too is you just got to go back to the big three: what we put into our bodies, our sleep, right, and staying, exercising, staying fit. Like if we're not doing things consistently in those three areas that are going to be good for us, then we struggle. The things that work against that are typically we don't have boundaries. We don't have, and I'd actually add a fourth thing to that: relationships. Like we need to spend time with people outside of it. So, it's what's called the big four today. But we got to make sure that we're spending quality time with people we love. And we got to be protecting those other things. And I don't think we do a good job of that because, there's still this culture of work, 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 watch film all day, all night long.
Yeah. So, man, what you said there about identifying, you talked about, if people call us coach, we are a coach. What we do is coach. I had someone ask me one time, and it kind of brought that to light, and it was on the military side. But they said, "Who are you?" What do you mean? Well, like, who are you? If I were going to describe you, what would it be? And I listed off all of my jobs, right? I'm a podcaster. I'm a coach. I'm a soldier. And they were like, okay, so if all your jobs fired you today, you're nothing? Who are you? Right. And so it really did. We get overly connected to those titles. I've been wearing the Army uniform for like almost 18 years, and it's weird to me to think about taking it off. I've actually started having some thoughts lately of like, I think I'm done. Number one, I'm tired of shaving this goodness off every month, but I think I'm just done. I've given it my best. It's given me its best, and I'm so close to retirement, and so it's a hard one to think about. But even if I make it the next 2 years, you got to stop doing something you've been doing for 20 years, and that is just wild. And coaching to me is still, it's almost like a hobby. It's a job. It's a hobby. I love it. It's fun. It doesn't quite define me yet. I don't think I've just been doing it long enough, but I know there's some guys out there that have been doing it. I work for Coach Bill Blankenship, and this is his 40th year as a coach. I'm just like, well, I can't imagine like taking the whistle off. Every year is a retirement rumor for him, so I expect he'll probably be coaching the next 10 anyway. But somebody in the media will be talking about his retirement today, most likely when this episode comes out. But I can't imagine like looking at the end of that. And so you talk about mental health when we do connect it to wins and losses. We do connect it to bad parenting, or I don't say bad parenting, parents that are, negative for our organization, or having to deal with that discipline, the relationships, all that. Man, it's just wild to think we can't even disconnect that from our title, from our job.
Yeah, I'm going to go a couple directions here. I love what Coach said there at the end, so I'm going to start with that one. I actually had that one at the end, but the identity thing I think is huge, and I can't speak for everybody else. I can just speak for who am I? I'm a child of God, and if that, I went to some funerals the last couple of weeks of people that were teachers for a long time, and they have passed on, and the impact you leave on others, and you try to express the light that God has given us. I think that's who we are. And whether you're a coach or you're a consultant or whatever you are, I think that's our entire goal. And I think sometimes we lose that, whatever job we're in. That's why there's workaholics in every job. There's doctor workaholics, there's lawyer workaholics, there's coach workaholics. It's because they've lost their identity. And Coach hit that on the head. And coaches, for whatever reason, we treat it like it's a dang award, like it's a privilege to ruin your life for a sport. And to me, I know who I am. I'm someone who's forgiven by God's grace, and I'm not going to keep preaching, but to me, that's who I am. And so because of that, I want to share that with other people. And I do that through coaching. Like, that's what I love to do. I feel like I've got a gift to do that. That's what I want to do. And so I think that's one thing on identity is find whatever yours is. I can speak for me. I can't speak for everybody else. But find yours. Find truly matters to you. Because honestly, when you leave the funeral, how many people really are going to remember that person? Those are the people you impacted. Those are the people you impacted. And teachers and coaches have an opportunity to impact a lot of people, And not one person cares if you have a ring or not. So just kind of remember that stuff as you're going through it. I wish I had remembered that stuff earlier in life. And here's the other deal. If you aren't good as a coach, they're going to fire you. That's just how it goes. That's part of the business. And they're going to replace you. If you drop dead at work, they're going to replace you in about 2 or 3 weeks, and they're going to move on. So make sure there's something more than just that. So I'll get off that train because I did want to get some practical things. Some practical things that I've found I think would help coaches would be this. One, have a real off season. I think that's new. Like this is a new thing with travel sports and the economics of year-round sports now. I think that coaches a lot of times create for themselves this 12-month calendar with no breaks, and I can't miss, and I can't do this, and our kids can't. So not only are you burning yourself out, you're also burning your athletes out. Like we got baseball programs now that are working out in October. They don't play a game till March. Maybe it's okay to get better, but maybe build in a little bit of time so you don't burn yourself out. Football, same thing. Like, I don't really know if you're going to get a whole lot better doing a bunch of football drills in January when you don't really play a game that matters till probably September. So build some off time, build time to be with your spouse and your family and those that matter where you're away from everything. Second thing I'd say is find a hobby. Podcasting became Daniel how we like it. So this is one of our hobbies. I like to produce coaching books. So I've written like 28 of them, but that's therapy for me. I enjoy doing that stuff, and so that's a hobby for me. I need to find other hobbies that don't involve the game. That's my next challenge. I need to find a hobby that doesn't involve the game of football because I need to find something outside of that. So travel's kind of become that for me. We like to travel a lot as a family and do a lot of things there. And then the last thing we kind of mentioned, and I think JP brought it up, and it was good, was find your identity. And it doesn't need to be just as a coach.
Yeah, and I love that about the hobby thing because I think as you get other hobbies, you can start to say, "Hey, here's some other things that I do." It brings your sense of self and who you are, and is more multifaceted. There's more different parts of what you do. I think one of the things, I'll just add this real quick, and then Daniel, you had a question or you were to take it somewhere else, but I just think it's also really important. Is you talk about these boundaries of like having an off season, or maybe I'd say I'm gonna watch as much film as I can up to this point so I can get 6, 7, or 7 hours of sleep, right? Or whatever it be. That the big thing is we also have to identify what's getting in the way for us. Because I think most coaches know they need to do more, like eat, like as far as eating better, exercising. They also know they need to stop doing certain things. But we have a fear that's keeping us, that's getting in the way. And that fear is getting fired, that fear is losing. And I think so often we're afraid of that's that short-term fear that we give into. And we need to really look back and say, man, what's actually even worse? 5 years from now, 10 years from now, my relationship with my kids, my relationship with my spouse, not having a relationship with your spouse, right? And that's really what you don't, like, and I think I get caught up in my work. Like I be working on a new book or something like that. And I can let that fear of failure or that drive to succeed and get this a new opportunity in my work, that fear drives me, and I gotta say, well, hold on, step back. What's actually worse? If I have to lose something, I'd rather lose this job than lose that relationship with my kids or with my spouse, right? So we have to figure out what the fears are that are oftentimes driving us, and we have to work through those.
Yeah, I was going to tell one quick story. I know, Daniel, we got to move in a direction. We don't want to eat too much coach's time here, but there's a school we play who I hired one of their coaches. So this is coming from a guy who's on that staff. So it's a pretty accurate story. And so we meet on Sundays we try to keep it about 4 to 5, maybe 6 hours at most on Sunday during the season, try to be sensitive to guys' time. We don't meet on Saturday. But the staff he came from, they met from like 8 to 5 on Saturday, and then like 12 to 9 on Sunday. And I asked him, well, how much work are you getting done? He said, well, not really any more than we do here. But coach wants us up there because he wants all our trucks parked outside the field house. So if community people drive by, they see that we're putting in the hours to be successful. What a freaking joke. And what are we doing right there? Like, I mean, to me, but that's the world we've built in sports. If you lose, but you're working hard and doing things traditionally, you might keep your job. But if you step outside the box and do something different, you might get fired. That's just kind of part of how it has to be. And I think that as coaches, you mentioned it, it's the fear, not just the fear of losing or the fear of being fired. It's the fear of doing something different. Like a lot of times that's one of my biggest fears is being the weirdo that tried something and epically failed. That's a huge fear I have, and I have to overcome it every day.
As a coach, you've got to find your fulfillment. If you're not being fulfilled where you are, and then so you start just trying to dive off into it more because whatever reason, right? Move around. Go find a position that is going to give you fulfillment and that's going to allow you to do all the other things that we've talked about here tonight. So keeping your family intact, spend time at church. You should not have, Coach Simpson, you said something when we first started doing these podcasts, and it's toward the beginning of the season. And it has kind of stuck with me because my wife said it to me when the football season got started. And I think it was more of a joke, but honestly, it's not. I added a lot of driving to my schedule this year. So, but basically, she said, well, I'll see you in December. And you had said something to right as we started this podcast about you don't have to give up your family, you don't have to give up your life to be a coach. Like it's not that serious, right? You can't take this that seriously. And so make sure you're not doing that as well. Make sure you're not overcommitting to a game, to a kid's game. Yes, there's always going to be the Nick Saban that comes on and says, "Hey, we work 18-hour days. We never take days off. Whatever, sleep in the office." Buddy, you could try really, really hard for the rest of your life, and on the day you die, you'll be about as quarter good as a coach as Nick Saban. So there's no reason to try to copy everything he does, right? The dude has just got it figured out. And I hope that at some point he says enough is enough too and just goes and has a family life because there's no way that can be good for him upstairs either. But yeah, just having something that fulfills you within your coaching career. And if that's, for me, it's no spring sports. I know that I can give a little extra in football, but I can't pick up a spring sport as of right now. Maybe someday that'll change, but I need that time with my family. It's just, so that's kind of how I do it. My fulfillment is these podcasts. It is helping educate coaches. So even when we get done with practice, when there's coaching staffs that want to learn, I want to teach. So, it could be whatever it is, X's and O's. It could be culture stuff. It could be, hey, how does the military tie into this? I just want to sit and talk about ball, but outside of that field that we go stand on every day, right? And so, that's kind of where I found my fulfillment is just betterment of the program, I guess.
Yeah. I know we got to probably, I don't want to kill the coach's time, but I do want to make sure you, Coach, plug your book for us because I'm going to go buy it. And so I want to hear where it is and where other guys can go get it.
2022, I published a book called The Culture System, and it's all about the framework that I really teach coaches on, how to first off get clear on your leadership philosophy, make sure you have some good disciplines there, and then how you establish, support, and enforce culture, how you run a leadership council, how you co-create standards, how you support those, how you discipline, and very, very practical stuff. So that book's available. You go to Amazon, iBooks as well, or Apple Books. And then my newest book is The Sports Parent Solution. And so it's all about how to, as the subtitle says, to transform your greatest obstacles into your greatest allies. So, a lot of times we see parents as the biggest problem or biggest challenge. And yet, if we really want to support athletes' experience, create a great team experience, and help to develop our young people, we need to work with the most influential person in their life, which is their parents. And so it's very, very practical ways that I have with my clients at the high school level and the collegiate Division I level have worked to engage parents and build a partnership there where We're all working on the same page. And it really is amazing. The results that we're getting with these strategies is incredible because the athlete experience is improving, the team's performance and experience and buy-in is improving. So the culture is growing. But probably what's most exciting and most impactful for me is that when coaches have used these strategies that I outline in the book, the feedback has been parents are saying, wow, not only do I appreciate this program more as like what it's doing for my kid, but it's also about what it's doing for my relationship with my child. We're actually helping parents become closer with their kids, helping to sometimes some of those relationships are strained. There's teenage, for American football, it's like the strained relationships of a high school teenage boy are often is the common default mode for kids and parents at that time. And so we're able to use sports to help bring them closer together, which is pretty powerful.
Yeah, because I just looked at Amazon. So you're not going to brag, so I'll brag for you. You are a bestseller. I just saw on the new one you put out. So I've got both those in my cart, and I'll get those pretty soon. Excited to read them.
Yeah, thanks. And I mean, you can get links to them too at tocculture.com. That's my website, tocculture.com. But yeah, sports parent solution and the culture system. Thanks, Coach.
Awesome. Well, guys, this is one of those episodes that I don't want to end because I'm learning so much, and I know that sometimes it's hard to talk culture. You know, a lot of coaches just want to talk X's and O's, and it's because we're so weak at it. We don't like talking about the thing we're weak at. But man, when you get into a really good conversation, sometimes it's hard to end it. Coach Nerbun, man, we really appreciate you came on with us tonight to talk. And honestly, we discussed so many topics. We're probably going to reach out to you again because um, this is a topic that goes untouched way too often. So I appreciate there's people like you doing what you do in the professional community, helping coaches find themselves. You talked about the mental health and just taking care of themselves. The books I also am going to pick up and read. And parents, man, ah, they're the greatest asset. And just like you sometimes, like you said, sometimes they can feel like they'd be your greatest obstacle. So
I'll give you a real quick tip here, Daniel. I know we're about ready to go. And by the way, Coach, make sure we put in the links. I'm sure Daniel will do all that. But if they want to bring you in, like if I want to bring you on as a consultant, how to do that. Before we do that, though, I want to say this: like my perspective towards parents changed, and it drove me nuts as a young head coach hearing parents tell me in the meetings, "Wait till you're a dad. Like wait till it's your kid. Wait till it's your kid." And I thought, man, I'm never going to act like that, And then I had kids and they sat them on the bench. How dare those coaches? And I coach. Like I know what they go through. And then I'm sitting in my other mind going through, I'm still the dad of that little girl. You better freaking put her in the game or we're going to, and so I'm telling you, there's something really to that, like understanding to be able to see through their eyes. And we could do a whole podcast, and maybe we need to bring Coach back on for that one, but a whole podcast on trying to at least understand where they're coming from. I've now, since my kids have come through, I'm not perfect with parents. I'm sure if you ask ours, they're probably like, "Whoa, that guy." But I at least understand that most parents are, believe it or not, trying to do what's best for their kid, and probably the very wrong way, but they're trying. So I didn't mean to get off on that. I do want to make sure, Coach, if we want to bring you on, as you can tell, I got a lot of issues, and I want to bring you on to come in and be my kind of a consultant to me. How do we do that?
Yeah, you can reach out to me. And my website's tocculture.com, which can, like, I've got an online course there all around the culture system framework and how we manage playing time and all those things. But if you really want to just reach out to me individually, email me at JP Nerbun, Nerbun at tocculture.com. And I can send you some information. We can set up a call if it's something that you might like to explore and learn more about, and we can see if it's the right fit. It's not the right fit for everyone, and it's a commitment, require a lot of work out of our coaches, in one regard, to work on themselves. But if you're interested, yeah, you can reach out to me via email.
And are you on social media anywhere, Coach?
Yeah, Twitter is at JP Nerbun, Nerbun, and then Instagram, my assistant runs that. It's at TOC Culture. So And I got a podcast also that's just all on culture. If people are interested, it's called the Coaching Culture Podcast.
Yeah.
So.
Awesome. Well, I am on Twitter at Coach Chambo OK. Actually started an Instagram as well. There's nothing there. Well, there's some stuff there from like maybe 10 years ago. So I don't know. Maybe I'll edit it out. Who knows? You can also email me at chamberlainfootballconsulting@gmail.com. Coach Simpson, where can we find you at, sir?
All things FB Coach Simpson. So FB Coach Simpson at Gmail is my email, at FB Coach Simpson on Twitter, a lot of the Facebook groups, and then at fbcoachsimpson.com is my website.
The podcast is on Twitter at Coaching101pod. You can find some little, we started cutting little pieces out of each of our podcasts, post them there so you can listen to them, see if maybe if you're going to like that one or I don't know. We're really just trying to, build some interest in what we got to say. We want to thank you for being a listener on the Coaching 101 podcast. We hope you join us next week as we continue to make the complex more simple. Please consider subscribing to the show so you'll always know when the new episodes are coming out. Coach Nerbun, once again, we just want to thank you very, very much. Appreciate you coming on tonight. And we're going to have to figure out who it was that sent us. I originally thought that I knew Coach Malone, I guess, is the one that says he listens to your podcast. And he said, hey, man, bring this dude on. So, Coach Malone, we appreciate you as well, man. A little shout out here on the podcast for you being a listener to both of our shows. So thank you for getting us connected.
Thanks, fellas.
Yep. We'll leave you with this. It's hard to beat someone who never gives up. No matter the situation, find a way.